Everybody. Thank you for attending tonight's Selectmen meeting, March 28, 2022. We will start with roll call, please.
Selectman O'Connell here.
Gary DePalma here.
Greg Bendel here.
Kevin Kara here.
We have just come out of executive session for the purpose of discussing strategies with respect to litigation involving property located at 64 Wildwood Street in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, and to ratify, validate, and confirm any action taken at the March 14, 2022 executive session, and further to discuss strategies with respect to litigation involving multi-district litigation against manufacturers and distributors of opioids in accordance with MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, and further to approve executive session minutes from June 14th, 2021 prior, June 14th, 2021 post, June 28th, 2021, September 27th, 2021, and March 14th, 2022 in accordance with MGL Chapter 30A, Section 22. If you could all stand and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. All right, we're going to start with the opening of Treasury warrant numbers 38, 38A, 39, and 39A.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, so moved. The approval of minutes from February 28th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? No? All in favor?
One abstention.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. And now we will go right into appointments. First up, we have Jill Elmstrom, Mann, from Man & Man PC on behalf of Fordham Parking LLC regarding public hearing for a permit to remove earth for property located at 99 Fordham Road. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Jill Mann here on behalf of Fordham Parking LLC, as indicated, for an earth removal permit. I have a copy of all the green cards that I'm going to give to you. I also have a copy of the bond, which is similar to the bond that we provided for you with another project. I just thought it would be better to secure it ahead of time so that the board could actually see it and then get that secure.
Thank you.
So, we're here in connection with an approval, a site plan approval to construct a parking lot on the property of the Shriners. So we all know where Shriners is at the end of Fordham Road, at the cul-de-sac, basically. So a few months ago, we appeared before the planning board and secured site plan approval as well as a special permit because of the configuration of where our driveways were. So that special permit I did include in your package. In order to accommodate all of the improvements that are necessary, we need to remove earth from the town of Wilmington, and obviously we need an earth removal permit to do that because it's more than 450 square cubic feet, right? So in your package, we did provide you with
I'm sorry, I forgot to. My apologies. I skipped some information. So I do need to ask Beverly if the notice was published, posted, and served upon interested parties as required. Okay. And it was posted, and the application is complete. All right, great. And then I need to entertain a motion to open the public hearing for purposes of considering an earth removal permit as described. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, the public hearing is now open. Just if there's any questions, we'll wait till the end. They should be directed through me. You've already identified yourself, so I apologize. You can continue.
Oh, please, no. Did help. So we're here tonight to seek that earth removal permit. There's basically a net removal because we have a cut and a fill, and we did give you that plan. Here with me this evening is Brent Cole and Jeff Merritt from Granite Engineering, the civil engineers in connection with this project, as well as the approval. And we did provide that with you. We were anticipating somewhere around 25,000 cubic yards of material to be hauled off-site. It's about a 6-acre parcel of land, and it's literally where the, and we did provide you with an aerial shot as well. It's where the parking lot, the gravel parking lot for Shriners used to be. As a result of Shriners' reduction in many of the events that they've had and the intensity of those events, this is an alternative to raise capital for Shriners that doesn't involve necessarily like those big events like the circus. And we're located in that particular area, and there is, just so the board knows, that there is still sufficient parking to address the needs and the uses of Shriners. That was something that the board paid very careful attention to. And we do have 2 dedicated openings as well, just to let you know. So where our parking lot is, we go in one driveway, and the other driveway is intended for, family access. So you don't really want to mix the commercial property entrance of what we will be using in the family, so they're separated too. And then we did provide you with a construction route and timing as part of the submittal that Granite had made. And as you can see, Mr. Aluni from the engineering department did review these plans and actually proposed a list of conditions. We've reviewed all of those conditions, and they're more than reasonable, and we believe also that, the posting was surety in the amount of, I think, $263,000 was also a reasonable posting. And I did deliver to, the Secretary of the Board a copy of what that bond will be. The original, provided this board approves it tonight, the original will be issued, and the insurance agent will deliver it to me, and then I will deliver it to the Selectmen's office, the town administrator. I'll deliver it to you, and it'll be the original bond that can be held for security in this particular thing. I don't know if the board has questions relative to the actual process, which Mr. Cole and Mr. Merritt can answer. I can answer some questions. Please.
Thank you, Ms. Maynard. I will open it up to the board.
Just going forward, if I could ask if you could take the,
Let me sit there.
just for the cable access, I know it's easier for them to hear through those mics.
Yeah, of course.
Before we actually open it up, Mr. Hudson,
I do. So as noted, the engineering office has reviewed this, Public Works and Engineering. Department of Public Works has reviewed the application for the permit to remove earth materials within the town of Wilmington. The above referenced project, the applicant is proposing to remove approximately 26,338 cubic yards of material from the project site to accommodate the grading required to complete construction of 246 satellite parking space facility for Amazon. We note for the board that the project received approval from the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission. As such, DPW recommends granting the earth removal permits subject to the following conditions, and they lay out a number of conditions here. I'll pause on those before we go forward, but also would note that the Board of Health, Shelley Newhouse, the Health Director, recommends approval. Al Spalding, the building inspector, has no concerns or issues. And the planning director, Valerie English, notes the project located at 99 Fordham Road received planning board and Conservation Commission approvals earlier this year for construction of a 246 space parking lot. The grading plan submitted for the earth removal permit reflect what was approved. As such, the grant of special permit is recommended.
Great, thank you. I'll open it up to the board for questions. Selectman O'Connor?
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you go
Sorry,
first.
Gary.
So just a couple questions, and I know that everything looks in order, but just for my own knowledge, how long do you believe that this construction will take if everything's approved?
Yeah, so right now, it's looking like it would be a 60-day bill.
Okay.
If there's delays during construction, it could extend past that, obviously, but the idea is to get in there quick. There isn't a building, obviously, so there's, foundation construction and walls and stuff like that, so there's no lead time issues with a typical project that includes buildings. So it should be a short and quick construction period.
Thank you. And then I see obviously that Aleppo Shriners is still maintaining ownership for the property, so you're going to be in a long-term agreement with them, I would assume. Just for my own benefit, obviously we have a lot of things that come before us for the Shriners. Can you speak a little bit about, and I know it's maybe outside of this scope, but just since I have you here, what the intent is in terms of how people from the parking lot, when they park there, how they're going to get to Amazon? And, do we have pedestrian pathways if people are walking, or is there going to be any sort of transportation provided to those employees? Because it's a very busy road, a lot of people turning in and out, a lot of trucks. So, it's probably a little bit outside of the purview of what you're asking for tonight, but for the benefit of the board,
That was something, that was a very.
pedestrian safety is
the
paramount for
planning
us, so we'd be interested in hearing about that.
Absolutely. So while Brent's setting up, this was something that the planning board was very concerned about. When we designed the site, they had asked us to make certain changes to that cul-de-sac. And in addition to that, they asked us to slope people down. So there's, it's a textured finish, so that people don't fly around it, exactly for your point, because you don't want people speeding. Although all Amazon vehicles, believe it or not, have a controller on them. They have a governor, so that they can't do that. But they also asked that we separate the two parking entrances, so that the driveway for go ahead, Brent, so that the driveway for the parking area, oh, yeah, you want to come up here. So the driveway for access to the
Actually, you know what,
Amazon parking lot?
don't worry about the cameras because we've got them
Yeah.
all around.
Oh, all right. So access to the Amazon parking lot is separated completely from the Shriners, and so
Okay.
is the parking lot on purpose.
Okay.
So all of this Amazon parking is shown to the north.
There.
And then in order to get to Shriners, there's a completely separate entrance that is well signed, and you can read it. And then when you get to the back, for the fire department, they wanted to make sure that the driveways were connected by a loop, but we put in a gate that they have a key to. So
Okay.
this way, Amazon employees cannot get past the gate, and people, individuals, families who are going to these events can't get through the gate either. So we separated them.
Okay.
So it's a great question. So I don't know if you want more clarity, but.
No, that's extremely helpful. I just wanted, I mean, I trust that the people within town hall, like Valerie, Paul, the fire department, are all looking at that, but just for my own knowledge.
But it's nice to at least give you
To
the.
at least know, that safety is being obviously,
It was definitely paramount for those reviews, believe me.
so, okay, thank you.
Mr. Palmieri?
Do you have a route that your trucks are gonna be taking, removing the,
Yeah, the planned route is Fordham, and then you take a right at the end of Fordham there, and that's your access to the highway. So it's real quick, down Fordham, right, and then you're on the highway there. So that would be the planned route. It's similar to the route that was done at, I don't know if you were here then, but there was a project 2 years ago on Fordham Road for 110 Fordham Road. That's the old VW dealership or facility there, and the haul route's the exact same for that, down Fordham, and you're right there on the highway and you're off.
okay, thank you. And the second part is, are you planning any lighting at the Rotary down there?
Oh, at the Rotary,
I mean, not at the Rotary, excuse me, the cul-de-sac.
no.
No, lighting, there's site lighting, so that's part of the civil site package and the site plan approval that up on top where the parking lot is.
But also, it used to be stadium lighting, so before, when you would go to Shriners, I mean, all of us have been to Shriners at some point, right? And you have those big, huge stadium lights, they no longer have big, huge stadium lights. So,
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact height, but that was one of the things that the planning board and Mr. Gingrich looked at too, is that the lights weren't gonna be those real large ones. What are they?
Yeah, these are full cutoff fixtures, LED fixtures, down lighting, no longer dark sky compliant, if you will, yeah, modern.
No longer Foxwoods.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How many spaces, and it'll be a 24/7 type of operation?
Yes, 246 spaces,
Okay. And it'll be 7 days a week, all,
yes.
okay.
Correct.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up on Selectman O'Connell's question about transportation. I don't know, did you say you were gonna be shuttling
Oh, no.
employees back and forth? No.
So the
So-
use, for Shriners or for the other? For Shriners or for?
No, for your satellite parking.
Okay, I can, yep. So the way that really works, it's satellite parking. So what they do is, there's no active use of that, it's simply parking. So what'll happen is, empty vans get stored there. So when people come to drop off their vehicles, in order to not have all the, for lack of a better term, pedestrian vehicles, non-commercial vehicles, so the employees come, drop off their cars, park there, pick up a van, then they go to Amazon, where they properly stage the van in a permitted area. So there isn't any, shuttling. So the employees, it's not like, Mass General used to have this big shuttle, right? You want to go to one building, you have to drive to a parking lot and they'd shuttle you in. That's not the way it works. You drop your car off, you get your van and you go.
All right, yeah, and the reason why I asked is because, so then there'd be no pedestrian walking, because there's no sidewalks over here,
We
it seems.
are not
from that.
proposing any walking for those people.
Okay,
Great.
That's,
Yeah.
yeah, for the sidewalk.
yeah, because you'd think,
Yeah, just thinking if they're walking, I wasn't, not so familiar with the Amazon site, but thinking that they're walking down.
oh, walking
Yeah,
along.
no, yeah.
Sidewalks, and it's just
Yeah.
people coming out of the event, it's just not a good recipe.
Right.
Yeah. And then, sorry to just jump in here, but is all the land there, is it all exclusively on Wilmington? I know there's kind of funky topography there, so is there any part of that parcel that touches North Reading?
It touches it, they abut, but it is, all of this land is in Wilmington.
So you don't have to seek approvals from North
Correct.
Reading at
Yeah,
this
it-
point? Okay.
And just, yeah, and then just another follow-up, so is there gonna be any blasting?
There could be. So we've done some test pits out there, and we're not sure if it is refusal at ledge or refusal at boulders. It looks like when they built Shriners back in the day, that there may have been some blasting, and the material was kind of pushed to flatten an area. Kind of picture a top coming off of a hill, and you push the top to make a flat spot. So we're not quite sure if what we're hitting is boulders or if it's ledge refusal. If it is ledge, then obviously there's state law that has to be followed for that, and local ordinance as well. But in the event that it is boulders, those obviously don't typically need to be blasted, but there could be, is the true answer, yeah.
Okay, I'll open it up to the audience. If anybody has a question, please stand, state your name and address, and ask the question. Good evening. Sure.
I think it's parcel 112 on the corner there. There's some questions about several items. The figure was mentioned earlier, about 25,000 cubic yards. That's kind of an abstract number. In a typical truck, how much does a typical truck hold?
They would probably use 27-yard trucks to haul.
So
somewhere
1,000
in-
trucks to remove that material in round numbers.
In round numbers, sure, yep.
That's a lot of trucks. Okay, so in 60 days, what are your hours of operation?
I think it was 7 to 3.
Yeah, and no
Well, I think it was-
Sundays.
No Sundays, 7 to 3.
So it's 6 days a week?
Monday through Friday. Hours of hauling are only Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 3:30. We agreed to that condition. Or we will agree to that condition. And then that's,
Okay, so 60 days is just shy of 9 weeks, let's call it 8 weeks in round numbers. 5 days a week, that's 40 days. 1,000 trucks, that's gonna be 25 trucks a day, something like that. Okay. So there were a couple of orders and conditions that were referenced. Mr. Hall mentioned one from the DPW, I believe. And there's one that's referenced in the notification for this meeting that says that the order of conditions there. Are those two separate listings or two separate lists of conditions?
It might be worth, if I could, just going through the conditions that is recommended by Public Works, and that may address some of the issues. So just starting from the very top, number 1, the permit is not assignable. 2, at the expiration of the permit, the grade shall substantially conform to the proposed grades as shown on the plan set approved by the Planning Board and Conservation Commission. Number 3, at the expiration of the permit, the entire area shall be covered with loam and seeded with a recognized grass seed of good quality, except where the area consists of proposed landscape. Number 4, the applicant, its agent, and employees shall use due caution when entering and leaving the site, and shall use extreme caution when passing school buses. Number 5, the hauling route for the construction vehicles and equipment is anticipated to be Fordham Road to Concord Street to Route 93. The hours of hauling on ways used by the public shall be limited to Monday through Friday, inclusive, and not earlier than 7 a.m. and not later than 3:30 p.m. The applicant shall agree to keep loam within the town of Wilmington wherever possible. a rock crushing operation, if rock crushing operations are to be used on site, they will be limited to the hours of operation between 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And on normal weekends, only, weekdays only. Rock crushing operations are not allowed on weekends or holidays. Blasting operations be in accordance with all town, state, and federal laws, regulations, and policies as may be applicable. Condition 10, the applicant or their designated contractor shall adhere to the stormwater pollution prevention plan and erosion and sediment control plan as approved by the Planning Board and Conservation Commission. Condition 11, the applicant or their designated contractor is responsible for daily cleanup of all soil material, stones, etc. tracked along the hauling route. Periodic inspection will be made by the engineering division to ensure that public roadways under local jurisdiction and along the hauling route are being maintained accordingly. Condition 12, the applicant or their designated contractor shall limit excessive dust and noise associated with the earth removal process to the extent practicable. Condition 13, the applicant shall notify the town of his/her intention to obtain a renewal of this permit at least 30 days before the expiration date of this permit. Condition 14, the applicant is required to furnish a performance bond made payable to the town of Wilmington for the faithful performance of the work under this permit. The engineering division is recommending a performance bond in the amount of $263,380. The applicant shall contact the engineering office of the Department of Public Works to coordinate said performance bond. So those are the conditions.
That listing of conditions, Mr. Hall, that's public record?
Yes, it is.
And can I get a copy of that?
You can contact my office and tomorrow, and we can provide a copy.
Thank you. So this is the first time I've heard about rock crushing operation. Can you talk about the likelihood of that needing to be required?
I don't know the likelihood of how likely it is that it's going to be required. It's similar to the blasting. It's a technique that's used to, move the material. If you come into material that of that size, blasting if there's ledge, and crushing if the rocks need to be crushed, and that's what you find on site. So it really depends on what they uncover when they start excavating, whether or not there's ledge or there's boulders or both. So if there is enough volume on site of rocks, then the crushing would be something that would be done. If there isn't a significant volume, then it would probably just be hauled off. It's usually how it works.
So you mentioned, Mr. Hall, that there's a restriction on hauling from 7 to 3:30. But that doesn't address the ongoing excavation operations and rock crushing operations. Theoretically, those could go on during other hours.
No, there's another condition.
There's another
that limits
No,
it.
it's, so condition 8, if rock crushing operations are to be used on site, they will be limited to the hours of operation between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. and on normal weekdays only. Rock crushing operations are not allowed on weekends or holidays.
So the normal course of operations does allow, other than rock crushing and hauling, it can do how many days a week? Is it 5 or is it 6?
5.
It's 5, Monday to Friday.
Yes.
7 to 3:30.
7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m.
This is for hauling and for crushing. I believe we have the right to construct under the normal permit on Saturday. Don't we? I think so. I can't remember, do we? Do we only work Fridays? Okay, so we don't, I want to make sure of that, because I have the decision right here. I want to make sure what it says in the decision. I just can't recall under the site plan.
Is the time on the blasting,
Yeah, no work on
Same.
Saturdays. So basically, I apologize. I'm sorry.
the time on the blasting the same, 9 to 3? Is that,
Blasting would always be 9 to 3, and then I just wanted to confirm, under the special permit, we also are limited to only working Monday through Friday. No Saturdays, no holidays either. So all activities, including earth removal, are limited to Monday through Friday. However, blasting is further limited by reducing the hours from 9 until 3 only.
If blasting is required, may have reference sort of to the, there's a whole process required for permitting
Mhm.
every instance of blasting, every
No.
day of blasting, how does this work?
So is it all right if I?
Yes, please.
So, if I may, when you get a blasting permit, you apply to the fire department, and then you apply for a certain blasting permit. That's what the contractor does. So in this case, it's probably gonna be a company called Masterson. So they hire maybe Maine Blast and Drilling. That's who we used last time at 110 Fordham, which is a very prestigious, well-respected blasting company. They go out, they go to the fire department, they secure a permit. Every time they go to blast, each event, they have to put out what they call a tone. So right before they blast, there'll be a tone put out. But before they even do any of that, they go to each of the properties. If your property is within 250 feet, they'll actually come knock on your door and ask you if you would allow them to do a survey of your property. While they don't ever predict that there's going to be damage, they do that to make sure if there is, they have a baseline for your home. And then if you have damage and they have a seismograph that indicates that there really was some sort of large vibration, then there's an insurance policy that Maine Drilling and Blast has, which is automatic, so it's better than anything you can have, because the insurance covers that event. They will put in seismographs, so what they do is they put seismographs at the corners of the property to make sure that the vibrations don't go above that certain allowable level, because that's gonna be part of the permit from the fire department, it's part of the regulations for Massachusetts. So all of that is put in place.
Thank you.
Of course, of course.
So I have a couple of questions concerning the elevation of this lot and how the property drops off. Is it possible to take a look at your 15-page, C5 through C15 grading and drainage plan? Can we look at sheet 5 and 6?
Yep.
And just folks this, and just ask the questions here. So these are the elevations?
The dark lines are proposed, the dashed lines that are kind of gray are existing.
Okay, so what do these numbers refer to?
They refer to 2-foot elevation changes in topography.
So here, we're going down from the existing area to, I get 98 feet, did I see in there?
I'm just gonna explain to the board, what the
Yes.
area in which he's asking about is the southern part of the parking lot that is the area between the Shriners lot and our parking lot. So that's the
Okay.
area he's asking about, so it's in between those two properties.
Thank you.
So the lot itself, the sheet gives us the rest of it. The lot is basically level, other than drainage requirements.
It will be level,
It will be level.
more or less. Yeah, there's obviously pitch in the,
Right,
for drainage purposes, but it is flattened to commercial standards,
Okay,
yeah.
so, and what is the base elevation of that, in round numbers?
I mean, it ranges anywhere from elevation 98 to 100 to 102, so to call it 98 to 102.
And what's the existing elevation of the gravel lot that's there?
I mean, that ranges from, same thing, 98 on up to maybe 112.
So you could be taking off 10 to 12 feet of the existing fill with the gravel, whatever the.
So his question is, he's
base
trying to
level is.
anticipate what the reduction or the shift is going to be. So on average, we do know we have a reduction. At most, there is a 10-foot cut in some areas. I mean,
Yeah.
we show that, there are. I mean, there's a big cut, and you can see it on your blast plans, that's what he's asking. I just wanna make sure the board understands, because.
Yep, no, thank you.
Yeah, so I didn't understand that either till this point, so I
Yeah,
have a
yeah.
question for Ms. Gingrich, if I may. Is that consistent with how you viewed this plan up to this point?
This plan is the same as the plan that was approved by the board.
So you recognized that there was 10 to 12 feet coming off that existing elevation to
Yes.
construct this lot? Okay. Can we look at the next sheet?
So now we're going to the rear part of the lot, and this is the part of the lot that still is between, and then that actually shares a border with North Reading. This Park Street is the North Reading property.
So this is the north side of the lot. This is what, this is the abutment to the.
So we have about a
to the residence.
250-foot setback between the improvements and the property lines that begin these people's homes. So we did a 250-foot setback about between 180 and 250, just so you know.
Between 180 and 250,
I believe, wasn't that the case? Yeah.
from the property line?
Our construction line to your property line. See that big, huge area? Yeah, that's all buffer, yeah.
Yeah, so.
It might be 210. I know it's 180 to 2 something. What was it?
It's, I know 25 is required,
Yeah,
and we have.
the typical setback
6 or
and
8
buffer
times that.
is 25 feet. We just made it larger.
180, I think.
I don't know what else to say, right?
So there's a lot of vegetation in this area right now. The way I interpret this drawing, that's all gonna be gone. Right?
So the only vegetation that gets removed would be what would be necessary to do the earthwork. So essentially where the dark lines, which are the contours, the proposed contours are, that would more or less be the limit of clearing. So everything that is from that line towards the, was that the north property line remains. You know, there's septic systems and stuff like that. So those would be.
This is the existing tree.
Correct.
shown,
Yep.
Right?
Yeah,
This is pretty much flat and vacant, there's a lot of brush in there.
that's the septic system.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's gonna stay.
Yeah,
obviously
that
can't do any
stays.
work over the septic
Correct.
system.
Yeah.
So, right now, the elevation here drops off very sharply from here down to this same level. So you're gonna build that up to 94 feet, I see, 93, 96, 98. So there's gonna be a lot of fill in this area.
Some areas are cut, some areas are fill. Yep.
Okay, but I live here, right there, so I kind of am familiar with the profile of what this is like, and from looking at this very carefully in the past. You're building your lot in what is now thin air. In other words, the way this land drops off, you're gonna fill a lot in this particular area, probably adjacent to the septic system, is the way I see it.
I mean, there's, like I said, there's fills and there's cuts. That's just, it's throughout the site. That's how it works. You know, you have to shave off some area and you have to fill some other areas.
Okay, and when you fill, what are you filling with?
You fill with the specified material and it's compacted and, you know, brought up to.
When we look at, there was an overall plan, I'll get the name of it here. So it's the single sheet earth removal permit overview plan. This is not, it's called earth removal permit overview plan. It's similar to the same view as this, it's different information, you don't have it.
We have just the master site plan right here.
Okay, because this, I mean, we're here to talk about the earth removal permit, and this is the overview plan, and I've got some questions that pertain to what's shown on that aren't here.
Can you indicate what they are?
Yeah.
And we're pretty familiar with it.
If you could just let me know what your overarching concerns are, so we can just ask the questions and.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'll get to the point here, I don't want to drag this out any more than necessary. So, there's existing vegetation that's gonna remain here, and there's existing vegetation that was just shown on the other plan that was here, but this whole area, the vegetation is gonna be removed, the way it looks to me. It doesn't clearly state that here, and that's why I had that question. So, if I can just ask you, this crosshatched area, what does that mean? It's all crosshatched here.
That's the limit of.
He's simply
work.
asking what the extent of the earth
Yeah,
removal is.
so that
which you have
that
in the
is.
plan.
What is the name of the plan that he's asking for? Because we have these in this copy, where we can at least point to something.
Oh, I do too. What, actually, I do too.
It's called.
Earth removal permit overview plan?
Yes, that's it, exactly.
Is this it? How come I don't have that? Yeah.
So,
Oh, I gotcha.
this is existing vegetation that's remaining.
Correct.
This is all, existing vegetation is gonna be removed because they're showing, here's the existing line, so there's no vegetation remaining in the original. There are trees called for in the plan, there's a lot of shrubbery and so forth to screen this area. That's going to go in this area here? Correct. Okay.
So he was asking, so when you looked at your earth removal plan, there is a distinct area that is beyond the parking lot. It's actually, I don't know, it looks to me to be maybe 25 feet, and it's shown as a crash line, and he's asking, is that where you're also doing earth removal? And it is, because you have to grade in
Right.
so that you don't have to have unsightly walls. So that's what we graded naturally, but also in that area, because we recognized we were gonna disturb vegetation, we were planting, and we put up some, put up a lot of evergreen trees, which is also shown on the landscape plan.
Great.
Actually, it was reviewed by Mr. Aluni, and he greatly supplemented that landscape plan, I can assure you, during the process.
Great, thank you.
Would you like to keep that?
You can
you
take
sure?
this if you
Okay.
want, you wanna take that?
Okay, thank
Yeah, yeah, by all means. I apologize, didn't even think of looking in my file.
All good.
And just one last question, all of this planting and landscaping that's gonna be done will be completed during that 60-day timeframe that you're discussing?
That would be the idea, is that we would get it done in this season. If it's, they may not plant it, if we get too far into the summer or something like that, timing wise and everything like that. But the intent is to have the whole project done as quick as
So,
possible.
for example, if we can really hit the ground running and do it in the next
Right.
couple of weeks, then we can get trees planted, but the second they start to really bloom out and the candles get too big and there's too much growth, they'll fail. So
Yeah.
you wanna wait until, October, you really
Yeah.
do.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to the board.
You're very welcome. Any other questions from the audience or the board? All right, I'll take a motion, to close the, hearing.
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Okay, this meeting is now closed. I will now entertain a motion to approve the application for earth removal as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? So moved.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate
And I
it.
will
Thank you
drop
very
off-
much.
Mr. Hull, I'll drop off the original surety to your office. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, you as well. What do I look like? I'm a cripple?
Okay, our next appointment is Valerie Gingrich from the Planning and Conservation Director regarding presentation and comment letter on draft guidelines from Department of Housing and Community Development for MBTA communities to establish at least one zoning district for multifamily housing by right. Hi, Valerie.
Hi.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's okay.
We're all-
Ready?
Yep, we're ready for you.
Okay, Valerie Gingrich, I'm the Director of Planning and Conservation. Here tonight to give an overview of the multifamily zoning requirement for MBTA communities. So in early 2021, there was new legislation that was passed. There was a new section created to the Zoning Act, Section 3A. And this legislation required that an MBTA community, which we are an MBTA community, actually on that image that you see on the screen, it shows all of the MBTA communities. I know you can't see like, each one, but just to show that there are a lot.
Yeah.
So each MBTA community shall have a zoning district of reasonable size that includes as-of-right multifamily housing use located within half a mile of transit with a minimum gross density of 15 units per acre. And there can't be any age restrictions, and it has to be suitable for families with children. So this was the legislation. Since early 2021, DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, issued draft guidelines to go along with this legislation to give communities more information on how to comply. And tonight, we're sort of checking a box. We're required to give a briefing to you all on the draft guidelines to remain in compliance with Section 3A. The deadline for that is May 2nd, so that we're doing that tonight. And the reason we're doing it tonight a little bit early is we also want to discuss some of our comments on the draft guidelines, which are due later this week. So if we, didn't hold the briefing or in the future don't comply with the timeline, non-compliance would result in the town being ineligible for certain grants, including, there's 3 that were mentioned in the legislation: MassWorks, Housing Choice, and Local Capital Projects Fund. And we can get into that a little bit more in a little bit, but wanted to kind of just give an overview tonight. There's a lot of information, and it's really dense, and it has a lot of nuance to it, so I look at this as the beginning of many conversations that we'll have, but at least tonight, kind of giving an overview and discussing those draft comments. So the draft guidelines mirror the legislation. You have to have a multifamily district that allows multifamily use as of right, and so you can't have it by special permit. All of our current multifamily is by special permit. It has to be as of right. So they did clarify that you can have a site plan review requirement through the planning board. That would be allowed and wouldn't be conceived as an impediment to the use. The zoning has to be suitable for families and can't have any age restrictions. So you can't have an over 55 requirement. You can't limit the size of bedrooms. And then it has to be located within half a mile of transit. And in our case, it would be commuter rail. So what I did was I put this image on the screen is a half-mile radius circle around the North Wilmington train station with the star in the middle sort of showing the station location. And this area, just so you get a sense of kind of its size, it goes north to about Salem Street, east to just about the highway, and then south to Federal Street, and west to Lawrence Street. So that's the half-mile radius circle. And then similarly, on the next slide, this is the same circle around the Main Street station. And this one goes north to just about the Market Basket Plaza, just the start of it. It goes east to just past the Methodist Church, south to the split with Lowell Street and Main Street, and then west past Deming Way. So it's quite a large circle, the half-mile circle. So this zoning district that's required would have to be located within one of these circles.
Valerie, can I just interrupt? What's the color designation? So why is there some green, some purple?
Sure.
What are we looking at?
So the green on here is a park. So that's Rotary Park right there in the middle. Let me see if I can use this successfully, not with the TV. The yellow is town-owned land, and then that kind of weird peachy color is those are schools. So it's showing different types of town-owned land. The purple circle that's the half-mile radius circle.
I don't see yellow. I must be colorblind. I don't know. You see yellow?
Greenish, like a neon.
It's like a neon yellow, like.
That was the peach I was talking about. Maybe I'm
But next to
colorblind.
it, right, you got peach, yellow, and,
Yeah, there's yellow over there.
yeah.
It's like the mustardy color.
More like
Yeah.
a mustard.
Mustard, yeah. Mustard.
The lime green is,
The lime green towards the middle that's Rotary Park.
the other green,
The dark green, like up in the upper right-hand corner, that bright green.
castle area.
Wait, would you mind coming up, Valerie?
Sure.
and show us? I mean,
Sure.
I'm even curious on the prior screen as well, what were we looking at?
So, this is Rotary Park.
Yep.
This yellow, what I would call yellow, mustard, maybe you're seeing it at a different angle.
It might be.
Oh,
Neon's green,
maybe.
it looks green.
It's
over
green.
there.
It
Lime
looks
green.
green from your angle.
Oh,
Okay, that's what
Okay.
it is.
All right, so I'm,
It's like neon, it's like a highlight yellow.
so I'm not going crazy, all right.
So, lime green
Yeah.
or yellow, depending on how you see it, is town-owned land. This color,
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like a beigey.
okay,
Great.
that's, those are schools, so that's the high school, middle school.
what are the polka dot ones?
So, that's just the half-mile radius circle is in dots.
Okay.
I can go back to the other ones too if you want.
Okay. Yeah,
So
I
right
don't-
now, we don't have housing within that? Or we,
We,
not by right, right?
not by right. So this is the North Wilmington
Image, and you've got, so train station here,
Now I get it.
Yeah.
you've got the Whitfield here,
Yeah,
Forms a circle.
other town-owned land, this is Middlesex Ave,
Mm-hmm. You see my house?
goes out to Lawrence Street, Salem Street's up here, Federal Street's right down here on the edge,
in the yellow again, or the green is what?
town-owned land.
Oh, and even the polka dotted part is town-owned land as well.
Right, yeah, these,
Okay,
yeah, that polka dot's kind of a set on top of it, like an overlay on top of the colors.
okay.
Oh, yeah, you can see it in the pink over there too, yeah, I see. I gotcha.
Thank you.
All right. So getting further into the guidelines, the multifamily district must have a minimum gross density of 15 units per acre. We'll get into that a little bit more, but the other requirement is that the multifamily district must be a reasonable size. The legislation uses this language, but it doesn't define what reasonable size is. So the draft guidelines that follow up the legislation definitely defined it. So they, the guidelines say that the district has to be at least 50 acres in size, and at least 25 acres need to be contiguous, and no part of the district can be less than 5 acres. So for context, I did some kind of measuring on GIS. So the general industrial and general business zones, the commercial and industrial zones in North Wilmington, right at the train station there, that acreage basically adds up to about 34, 35 acres. So this would be larger than that. Our central business district that is between Church Street, Main Street, kind of follows Rotary Park around to Middlesex Ave, that chunk of land, that's about 35 acres. So this would have to be at least 50 acres. And then the other measure of reasonable size is, which is not in the legislation at all, you have to have a minimum unit capacity that's determined by your type of transit community. And we are considered by the state as a bus service community, which we will definitely talk about in a bit. But right now we're considered a bus service community, and so we would have a corresponding requirement of 20% of our overall housing units would need to be allowed within this new district. So the math of that is, per the 2020 census, Wilmington has 8,320 housing units. So 20% of that would be 1,664. That number of units would need to be allowed in this 50-acre district, which we will talk about.
We may have units that already count towards this now that exist.
So when they're asked about that, they're very quick to say that, and we've had countless webinars on this and months of studying it. And that's a big reason why I say that this is a lot to take in, because we've been churning through this for a while now, and there's still questions. It's what you allow, what's on the ground today doesn't so much matter to them. It's what your zoning district allows in the future. So if everything was wiped away, what your zoning would create. So, they say it's a zoning exercise. They stress that it's not a housing production mandate. It's really a zoning requirement. So with these draft guidelines come a compliance timeline. First, this week, we'll submit comments on the draft guidelines on Thursday. A briefing to this board was due by May 2nd. We're doing that tonight. This summer, DHCD will take the comments that they received this week. They're going to issue final guidelines this summer. They haven't given an exact date, but they said summer 22. And then by the end of this year, communities that don't comply with something they already have, or maybe we're close and they could just kind of make a tweak. Communities that don't comply have to submit an action plan by the end of the year to talk about how their plans for complying. That action plan is going to be reviewed by DHCD, and they've said that they're going to approve that by March 31st of 2023. And then we would be required to use that action plan and adopt the zoning by the end of 2023. So I wanted to pause at this point after that kind of quick run through of the guidelines themselves. If there are any questions, or I can go right into the comments, because there'll be we'll have conversation about that for sure. Either way.
Thank you, Valerie, for the briefing. Appreciate you being here and your work on this. Just to be clear, so that essentially the town will have to make a decision whether we believe it should be the North Wilmington site or the central location. Is that correct?
We will have to figure out where it makes most sense. So we'll have to figure out where it makes most sense, what makes most sense. I think there's a lot of conversations to be had.
And so if the town makes a recommendation, that will then be sent to DHCD and they'll yea or nay it, essentially?
Well, it's hard to know what we can do until those final guidelines come out. So, and I'll get into some of the comments that I have on the guidelines. There's a bit of taking the legislation and broadening it. And a lot of every community I've talked to, seen on a webinar, we all have very similar comments. So I do wonder if there's going to be some scaling back on the final guidelines. I'm hopeful that there will be. So until we know what that looks like, it's hard to exactly know where to go. But once we get those final guidelines, we'll have to revisit and talk about next steps.
Yeah, Valerie, do we even meet the requirements? Because you're mentioning 35 acres and it says we have to have at least 50 acres. So if we don't meet the requirements, do we still have to fall under this?
So maybe I should get into the comments, because some of this gets teased out in the comments. We don't currently meet it. Well, let me go through this and then see how we...
No, because I have other follow-up questions to it regarding Princeton properties that's coming in, and also the property over the 62 Bridge. Used to be the old Diamond Crystal. I know you probably don't remember. I don't recall the name of but that's in proximity to the station. Princeton properties in proximity to the station, Metro, yeah. So wouldn't those be our, MBTA designated
No,
sites?
so Metro was built with a comprehensive permit. Princeton will be built with a comprehensive permit. So our underlying zoning, what they could build without a comprehensive permit, is what matters. So we would have to, so it's less about what's actually there on the ground. So Metro, we don't calculate how many units they have and try to figure out what that means, because the only thing that matters for this is that if Metro was demolished, what could you build there with the zoning that's applied to that site? So, and right now, actually, I would have to look to see what the zoning is there. I think it's industrial or something. So we have to create underlying zoning that would allow for all of these things.
In your comments to them, are you going to mention that we already have Metro and we're working with Princeton and we shouldn't be penalized with this additional from the governor?
I think it's how you might be looking at it, Kevin, and I think this is what Valerie, if I may just comment, is that it's not about what we have in the pipeline. It's futuristically that if you have certain parcels, what people have an opportunity to produce as a matter of right, rather than go by special permit.
I understand that, Judy,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is that we don't have the acreage to satisfy the requirement.
Well,
But we have,
I think before you even get into the requirement, I think we're misclassified, which I'm happy to
Yes.
see.
Yeah,
I think we misclassified to begin with. I would say we're more a commuter rail community than a bus community. So I think the guidelines that we may be subject to are erroneous to begin with, because I don't even think we're classified correctly.
Right.
But I mean,
Right.
Jump in front there, but
Yeah, maybe I should go through these, because I think
Yeah,
they
why don't
can
we go
answer
through
some
these?
of the.
Yeah, why don't we go through these and then go back to questions?
So I'm gonna sort of go back to each of those categories and comment on them. The first being our classification as a bus service community. When the 134 bus runs through Woburn, it turns around in Wilmington at the line. So if that's considered a bus stop, that's a little bit,
Foolish.
it is a
Yeah.
little foolish. So what makes a bus service community is you have an MBTA bus stop, or you have a bus station, or you have a bus station within half a mile of your border. So it also could be, they could have classified us that as Anderson Woburn is a regional transit center. It is, depending on how you measure it, it could be considered within half a mile of our border, but it only runs, I think, Logan Express. So that also doesn't seem appropriate. So the first comment to DHCD would be please reevaluate our status as a bus service community, because I think it's more appropriate that we're a commuter rail community. The next comment is on the minimum gross density of 15 units per acre. So that minimum gross density of 15 units per acre is in the legislation, and it's stated that way. And DHCD took this as, okay, you have to get a district, and you're not only measuring the parcels within that district for density, you're using the streets and the parks and everything, all land area within that 50 acres. So you're watering down the density on the actual parcels. So you need more than 15 units per acre as an allowed density to achieve the gross 15 units per acre. That's how they're reading it. I kind of want to challenge them a little bit to reconsider that, because the way the legislation's written, it's a requirement of gross density, understanding that there's going to be other limitations like septic and wetlands. So I think it also can be read that the legislature was saying, start with a minimum of 15 units per acre, because it's going to get chipped away at with wetlands and septic, and your net is going to be less than 15. So maybe they could just take a look at that interpretation. And now getting into the 50 acre. So every community, their district has to be 50 acres. So we would have to enlarge a district or create a new one, but it has to be 50 acres. And the problem with that is, as you all know, one size doesn't fit all. I mean, the communities that you saw just for a flash on that map there's a great range in context and what's appropriate. So having a 50 acre minimum it doesn't fit. So, and here I note that the central business district would not meet that 50 acre minimum. I want to just make sure I'm keeping up with my notes here.
And that 50 acre minimum is important because that's the area within which this by right development would be required.
Right, so you have to have a 50 acre district that has by right multifamily of 15 units per acre, but then getting to this next section, it also would have to have all of a capacity greater than that. It would have to have the capacity of that 20% of all of our housing units, 1,600 units, would be allowed within that 50 acres. So that density jumps up to like 33 units an acre. So, as I note here, that minimum unit capacity is not in the legislation at all. They made it up in the draft guidelines. So it's really an amplification of what's required. And maybe beyond what they're allowed to do, I would think.
Can I interject for 1 second and ask an overarching question here, and forgive the interruption, but I think it would be helpful. What did they state as part of this process what they are trying to achieve? Is it to increase more housing in Massachusetts? Is it to help with traffic mitigation so that it increases ridership? And respectfully stated, if that's a component of that, would it be appropriate to say that we're not really interested in putting anybody more on trains? We can't even get the trains that we have working correctly, which I know is kind of a sidebar thing that's not in your purview, but I mean, that's going to be so taxing on the MBT infrastructure, and respectfully stated, they're having trouble keeping up with what they have. So is there going to be a major capital improvement at the MBTA level over sweeping the whole state of Massachusetts, such that when we put more people on there, and then we have our whole affordability of a minimum of 10% that we're working on, and then we have our own school systems and our own infrastructure costs, which lead to another question that I know that if we're not compliant, we run the risk of not receiving certain funding. I'd be interested, perhaps not from you or the manager tonight, but I'd love to have a sense as to how much Wilmington's receiving year over year, to know that the amount of dollars that we're receiving, is worth being, I know we want to be compliant and do the right thing, but, what are we putting at risk?
No, all of those comments are very common, widespread.
Okay.
Can I follow up with Selectman O'Connell? You said on page 5, I just note the last paragraph that says, it's important to understand that the multifamily district's unit capacity is not a mandate to construct a specified number of housing units, nor is it a housing production target. Section 3A requires only that each MBTA community, which we're currently not, we're a bus community, has a multifamily zoning district of reasonable size. So does that mean we just have to designate an area of reasonable size and not have to worry about being mandated to have specified housing units? Is that what they're looking for? Just to say, okay, this is your district, and now we can go and not worry about it?
So it's interesting, they stress that it's not a housing production mandate, but they're asking us to set up the like the zoning, set up the rules so that more housing can be produced. So it's a little, yes, we don't have to go out and build the housing, but we have to zone so that someone can build the housing.
Is this for lack of a better word, or is this sort of like a forced 40B?
Yeah.
So once the zoning is established, it then allows any developer to come in and take
Build
advantage
housing.
of that area and force it, even though it says here
Right.
on page 5, it is not a mandate.
Yeah, right,
So it's not a mandate, they're telling us.
yes.
In this, but really, it is.
That's
Well,
immediately
right.
what I thought
And
was a
the
veiled
goal-
40B.
Wink, wink, nod, nod.
And the
Absolutely.
goal, the stated goal is that we, there's a, if you visit the website that contains all the information, there's a webinar. They go through the level of housing production, that we're in a housing crisis, we need more housing. So the goal is to produce more housing. This is sort of a first step in getting there. But I think when they say it's not a production mandate, it's a little, I don't know that I would have highlighted that, because you're setting up the rules
Yeah.
to produce housing. So I think they're trying to say that,
It's crazy.
we want, what matters is your zoning on the ground, and what comes out of it is not what we're concerned with yet.
But they're also not taking into consideration, because it's not their scope, that, okay, we have to build however many units, whatever that happens, then the taxing on our schools, on our roads, and all that other stuff, it just keeps water falling down.
Well, and to get down to basics, right? And I think this is in here in this minimum unit capacity. It's not keeping with what we've planned out for our small, compact nodes of activity.
That's what I mean, it's just, we don't need any, we
Well,
don't
it's a
need
broad
this.
brush. You can put a 25-story building in Boston. You can't do that
Right,
in
right.
Wilmington.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they're unfair. The rules of engagement, it's a broad brush for the
Right,
entire
right.
state. It's not a one-size-fits-all, to your point.
Right, there has to be a formula for,
Right.
for each
Right.
city, town, whatever
Right.
it be, so, yeah.
And that was, I think in the comments that I sent in the memo form, DHCD is asking us to do very detailed, tedious analysis, parcel by parcel, basically acting as developer, looking at the height, the setbacks, the parking, the wetlands, and saying how many units could be built, like, truly, like, not even a guess, like, what could be built on that parcel for every parcel in the district to show that we meet the 1,600 units that we're required to get to. But I don't know that, it's not clear that they've taken the same level of analysis in looking at the differences in communities and what's appropriate. So a challenge back is just to say that you can't do a one-size-fits-all for this. And if they did do an analysis on different types of communities and makeup and context, then maybe they could share that. And but this is definitely going to be a challenge for a lot of folks, a lot of towns.
It's the one-size-fits-all mentality that they're using. You can see the way they're structuring this right now. This is what we want, and this is what we're gonna get. Even though it's in the formula stages, it's not taking into consideration your communities individually.
Right. The timeline also has some challenges. By the end of this year, we would need to submit an action plan for how we expect to approach compliance. DHCD says that they're going to review those and approve those in a 3-month time period, but there's a lot of plans that they're going to be looking at, a lot of communities. So just kind of a comment back to them, maybe build some more time into your timeline there for yourselves. Also, we're going to want that action plan if we get to this point where we're proposing an action plan, we're going to want it approved quickly, because then there's a requirement for actually putting the zoning in place by the end of '23. And that doesn't really account for our town meeting schedule. It doesn't account for a public process that would be, very involved. So those are definitely comments on the timeline. On the, if we get to the point where we successfully adopt a district and they determine that it meets the requirements, they've added into the guidelines that tracking housing production may be required at the discretion of DHCD. So this is a minor comment, but if tracking housing production within a certain district does take close attention, it's going to take some effort, and that should be very clear in the guidelines, whether it's going to be required or not up front. And then the effect of noncompliance, those 3 grant programs, which we can get into the town's usage of them, those were specifically laid out in the legislation. In the guidelines, DHCD makes a statement that they could, at their discretion, take non-compliance into consideration when making other discretionary grant awards. So kind of opening it up to potentially other things, which again is a bit more reaching than the legislation. And I suggest not appropriate, because we have to know what non-compliance means.
Just by way of example, so you'll recall with the Princeton
Right.
project, there's $2.89 million in MassWorks money that we have received for, the work in the culvert, all the associated work to move the Princeton project forward. And because of the cost situation, we're requesting additional money, so
Right.
that would be pretty significant if we were not able
Definitely.
to.
One overarching question I have too is like, if you draw a radius like you discussed in the different areas near the MBTA, the half-mile area, just say there's no inventory of land. There's neighborhoods, they exist, there's people living in those houses, and there just isn't a bank of land that is even gonna yield these numbers. What do you do? I mean, if we look at the scope of the geography, we can't manufacture land per se. And I know you might know what's available, not available, and you don't necessarily want to give that playbook out to the open market. But what if we just don't even have the inventory or the bank of land with roads, train, existing builds, we may not, they may be, how do they even check their math to know that these metrics with the topography of any given city or town, because we're all different sizes, different populations, and have different miles of township or city land. I'm not using the right linguistics, but you guys get the point. We may not even be able to achieve these numbers anyway. So my point is, if we set the district or the zone and we check the box off, how much exposure do we really have? Like, what's our risk? Is there a way to quantify that to know if we're fighting a battle that we have very little risk anyway? Does that make sense?
Risk of
Future development being so burdensome. I don't mean to just say don't take it seriously and that we have nothing to worry about. I do think I'm deeply concerned that we're misclassified to begin with. That's a huge problem.
Yeah.
That's first and foremost, which kind of sets the tone of how much confidence I have in what they're trying to put forth. I'm not really sure whose idea this was. I don't know if it was just a bad day or a bad night and they thought of this, but this is catastrophic, especially with communities coming out of a pandemic, and
It's horrible.
I just think this is really
Stronghold is what it is.
is really, and I think it's a form of housing extortion, actually,
Totally
to
agree.
be so candid.
Yeah,
Awful.
and there's they set, so if we were classified as a commuter rail community, our requirement for unit capacity would go down to 15%. I think it's 1,200. Like, it doesn't get a lot better. But they also set a minimum for every community. Even there's a category called adjacent communities. They don't have any transit in their community. There's a floor that they set that community, those communities would have to zone for at least 750 units. So within that district. So imagine a really small community without any transit needing to do 750 units in a, maybe without sewer. Actually, Jill was just telling me about Middleton, and they don't have sewer. So it's the requirement for that minimum unit capacity, like I said, it's not in the legislation. It came out of the draft guidelines, and I think that probably every community that's affected will be commenting on it. So I'm somewhat, maybe something changes in the final guidelines.
I sure hope so. For everyone's knowledge, I have the MBTA Advisory Committee meeting tomorrow, and they're presenting to every delegate of every Board of Selectmen across the Commonwealth tomorrow, the same presentation.
In Valerie, I know this is futuristic. You said that this isn't current
Right.
information, but it does say that some communities, there may be a significant number of multifamily units already existing in the multifamily district. So those communities should generally expect fewer new units. So again, a contradiction, because it's, you know, it's saying it's not a mandate, but it is a mandate. It's saying that it's futuristic, so we have to put in the 1,200, yet it's saying that, you know, if we have multifamily units already, Metro, potentially Princeton property, then it would be fewer units, but
Yeah, so what
It's not.
that came up in a webinar, and they, the representative from DHCD explained it that if you're zoning for, 1,600 units in a district, but you already have 1,000 in that district, don't think of it as 1,600 new units, think of it as an addition of 600 units. Just perception-wise. You still have to change the whole zoning for the whole thing. But in our case, we don't have that level of multifamily near our train station, so it would greatly increase what could be built. So just running through this really quickly, next steps, submitting the comments by Thursday. The plan is to, for me at least, I want to keep kind of just looking at our parcels, looking at our areas, kind of just digesting this. But like I said, until those final guidelines come out in the summer, we're not going to know exactly how to proceed. And so when they come out, I expect we're going to revisit this topic and find our way forward.
Has anyone raised the issue of an unfunded mandate? Proposition 2.5, although it doesn't get used often anymore, had a provision in it that the state cannot pass unfunded mandates.
They've been very quick to say that technical assistance will be provided to towns. So,
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking beyond the implementation of kind of the provision here, it's the prospect of essentially changing the rules such that the number of housing
Structure.
units increases so dramatically that the cost borne, as the chair noted, with added school burdens and everything associated with simply having that many more units in a town.
I participated in a webinar with the Mass Municipal Lawyers Association, and that was one of their comments, that they were drawing up a list of comments to submit as well, and kind of drawing from towns. And I think that was one of the topics that they were gonna explore with a group of a committee. So I think it's definitely gonna be part of comments. The guidelines talk about taking into account infrastructure, but it's not clear what we're supposed to do in that account. Because there have been some webinars where they say, don't let the infrastructure piece of it hold you back. Just because there's not sewer there now doesn't mean there won't be someday. So there's a lot of confusion on how we would do this build-out analysis. Technically, they haven't given us all the numbers to do it. They haven't given us the information to do it, but then the capacity to do it, and it gets a lot of planners into heartburn.
Madam Chair? Just to quite, you leading right into my question when you say a lot of planners getting heartburn. Have you had any discussion with other planners over this, and are you sort of
Therapy sessions?
Are you sort of getting together as a group, even if you sent out something separate, maybe send out something as a group as well? I mean, it's hard to believe that, the legislature passes something like this without taking into consideration the comments from the professionals who are here in the communities.
We've been sharing ideas, thoughts, comments, memos, presentations. Actually, North Reading is getting this same presentation tonight, their selectmen. So we've been definitely talking through it and working through questions and comments together. And I'm sure every region is doing that. And just to note one thing, the actual legislation isn't that bad, because, and when it was passed, we started, the planning board, we started talking about, okay, how could this potentially fit into what we have? Because at that point, you didn't have a minimum 50 acre, you just had a reasonable size, right? So our central business district is 35 acres, seems like a reasonable size. Right. It allows multifamily. It just doesn't allow it as of right, so that would have to change. And then the allowed density is somewhere between, depending on the type of development and the situation, is somewhere between 10 and 18 right now. So it's right there. So I was thinking, this might not be so bad. We could make some changes to this, and it could meet the criteria. Then the draft guidelines came out, and that's not going to work. It would have to be expanded. It would have to have a lot more units. So the legislation was actually something that was a little bit hopeful that it was something we could work with. So that's why the points on where the draft guidelines take it further, I think it's a really important piece of the comments, because the legislation wasn't so bad.
Thank you. I just wanted to add the comment for some historical context, is that you may recall just a few years ago that the MBTA was letting us know that they were taking a look at the train count, the passenger counts at the North Wilmington. They were really kind of concerned about the future of that actual station, and now here we are being asked to consider drastically changing, 50 acres surrounding that location. So what a difference a couple of years makes.
To add to what Kevin had brought up, this isn't an MBTA community type areas. Has the MBTA weighed in on this to say how they feel about this? Because, this is like housing on steroids, where, if this does increase their ridership and increase their services needed, there's that piece. These comments, even for this and for the last project, we're submitting to the same body that's making these decisions. Mm-hmm. Is there any value in who's overseeing them, or even through our legislative delegations, to have kind of a full court press, if you will, conveying comments on this? Because, we're dealing with the MBTA on issues, and they're overseeing their own mechanics and their own modes of operation, if you will. It's like, who's big brother, big sister kind of overseeing that? And if we're not pleased with kind of the checks and balances when we submit the comments, and maybe they are to some resolution or to no avail, what's the escalation process if you want to make sure that everybody's in the know as to how Wilmington or any other community feels about this? What have you gleaned from your experiences on all those fronts? I know I threw a lot at you at once, but I have to believe this is going to impact state school aid that's going to be needed back to us and all of those things. So you think you're doing something on the good end with creating housing, but you're creating state debt as a result of your own activities. Do you know what I'm saying? Someone's gonna pay the bill for all of these things.
Well, they need like Greg said, they need to fix the infrastructure of the railroads and ways and stuff, because we need, fixing in this town alone. I'm sure there are other communities that need it as well, and now they want to burden it more. So they're implementing this, but are they gonna fix what needs to be fixed ahead of time, you know?
Right. That has been a very common comment. We are able to, put these comments into a letter form and copy our, legislators and submit it to DHCD. I understand that the MBTA was involved in the draft guidelines. I don't know how much involvement there was.
Right, I mean, they're in the train and transit business, not necessarily in the housing business and vice versa, so
Right.
I'd love to know what their conversations are, to know that, I mean, there has to be some sort of a partnership here.
Who's the project manager, you know?
Well, I think the other question, and if presumably there can't be the assumption that all of this additional housing that this legislation is intended to foster are all going to use transit. If I had to guess, it would
Right.
probably be 5%.
Yeah, low.
It was very low.
That
Yeah,
transit.
absolutely.
So how are those folks going to get from point A to point B?
Right.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, I mean, just going through this, you look at all these, developable land. Do we even have this? I mean, on page
That's what I was
2,
saying, do we even
it
have
talks
the
about what's developable land. But we don't have 50 acres of that in one area. I just, the gross density, all of these can be, addressed, that we don't even come under that
Well, I think
qualification.
I think that's a good point, and that's what I was saying, we only have a certain inventory, so if we can never meet the metrics,
Right.
do we get deemed non-compliant? Or do we just classify an area, call it that, knowing we can't, but then it sounds like they have you doing all sorts of calculations, so you're almost like turning in your homework.
Oh, yes.
And saying, I have a failing grade, but I want your money through your Mass Works programs and whatnot, but I'll never pass this test. I don't have the land and I don't have
Well,
the
remember,
acreage.
Reasonable size. I mean, you can go through page by page. We don't meet the reasonable size.
but remember,
Size of
they're
50
looking at this as wiping out whatever's there. So there's no more metro, there's no more,
Not according to what they said.
Right.
But I understand what
right,
you're
so-
saying.
yeah,
I
so-
understand what you're saying.
so they don't necessarily care what's built there now. They just want you to grab 50 acres that, that you can build on and zone that for the requirement. So,
Punishment's gonna happen, though, if we don't,
if
that's
we.
the A, it's just
if-
gonna come down to A. So they're gonna punish with finances because we don't have the land to do these developments.
But isn't it and I guess my take on this is the requirement is such that if we're required to place this zoning by right, that means that, for example, and we may be buffered by this to some measure, but if the area within that 50 acres had access to sewer, that instead, and was currently fully developed, there would be the opportunity for further development on the premise that you can tie into sewer, so instead of maybe 20,000 square foot lots, you can make it more dense because you have access to sewer. The perhaps saving grace for us, unless they're overriding the septic requirements, is that if that 50 acres is largely non-sewered and not able to be sewered. In our case, we have the comprehensive water sewer permit or plan. We may not physically be able to increase the density because if that area is largely on septic, it would butt up against the restrictions on septic systems.
But they would say, don't worry about, this is what they said in the webinar, don't worry about that right now, because this is looking forward into the, many years into the future when, maybe those restrictions are somehow not there, so that it's contradictory, because they're saying in your analysis, take into account the wastewater, but then they're also saying, don't let that limit you. Okay, so it is very contradictory.
Yeah, and it's a manager, and it sounds like they just want to make themselves feel good.
Yeah.
Because all they want you to do is to make up a zoning district, but it's not mandated because you don't have developable land, you can't meet the gross density, and you don't have reasonable size. But do a zoning district just so we can say that you have it, and we all are happy, and we feel that we've done something. It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, this is ridiculous.
And poor Valerie has to
So-
deal with it.
So for now, we're checking the box of having this presentation, right? So we stay in compliance
Yep.
until the next deadline at the end of the year, where we would have to submit an action plan for how we plan to comply or not. And we'll have to have, a conversation or many conversations after those final guidelines come out in the summer as to whether we think we can comply, whether we want to comply, or not.
We appreciate all the work you're doing on
Thank you.
this, Val. Appreciate you coming here tonight and just, keep us posted, and good luck with it all.
Thank you. Thank you.
And this
Thank
sounds
you,
like it's an unfolding story, there's more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like they're just, putting stuff on a wall and throwing and see what sticks, you know what I mean? Just like kind of throwing at dart stuff, oh, let's add this, so, nutty.
Thank you.
Thanks, Val,
MBTA's
appreciate
you.
it.
leadership
Have a
is
good
what they're
night.
looking for.
I think it's promising.
Okay, we will now move on to communications. Mr. Paul.
Yes, under the first communication item, I just wanted to make the board aware that we received a grant in the amount of $50,000. This is from DHCD. It is part of the ARPA funds that the state received, and they are providing this for pedestrian safety and stormwater improvements on Andover Street. They're one of the sidewalk projects, it's a little ways out at this point, is essentially looking at putting sidewalks along the stretch from 62 up to Emerald. It's about 3,100 linear feet. And this $50,000 would allow us to fund the 25% design portion of that. So it's, again, we've got, at the moment, Shady Lane, we still need to finish that work, and then the project after that would be Woburn Street from Sheridan to 62, but this certainly will be helpful to some measure. Next is just a summary of the virtual meeting we had with the MBTA. As you know, Chair Maselli and Selectman O'Connell and I have been participating in these now. This is our second session. They provided some history on the system, noting that Wilmington is the second largest maintenance facility next to Boston. They have a 24/7 call center with dispatchers available to deploy the maintenance folks, signal maintainers, and 18 to 20 of those folks are stationed in Wilmington. Question was raised about the number of incidents that have been reported historically, given that in my estimation, I certainly hadn't heard about these issues with gates. They did indicate that in calendar 21, there were 35 reports of the gates operating irregularly. As of, I believe it was the end of February, they're up to 20, and it's certainly increased since then. They are, one of the action items they were going to take a look at was the 10 crossings, the condition of the 10 crossings. And we're slated to meet or have a Zoom session again this coming Wednesday. Then a memo from me with regard to the status of the town school admin meetings. We had our most recent meeting on the 16th of March, discussed the building layout. Phil O'Brien, who's the architect that we're working with, provided some design alternatives, a so-called Scheme E, which was really based upon some feedback received at the previous meeting. The building essentially is more compressed, if you will, less elongated. Various interior features were added to address some of the comments provided in the prior meetings. There was discussion about location of egress and stairwells. The survey work on the property is nearing completion, and then following that will be the geotechnical work, including borings. There was some brief discussion about the budget. The budget to this point, $120,790 has been spent of the $955,000. So it's expected we'll be well within budget and may have some money available for transfer to the construction project if it goes that route. Next memo is with regard to the status on the senior center. In this case, the survey work has been completed. The owner's project manager noted there's nothing preliminarily that jumps out as being an issue. The landscape architect outlined some revisions to the site layout, primarily including relocating the pickleball courts to the back side of the lot. There was some discussion about increasing the number of courts. Bocce courts are being proposed to be located near the patio area closer to the building. There was a lot of discussion about the drop-off area in front of the building. It's, as it stands right now, proposed as a at grade with no curbs, trip hazards. And then there was some discussion about the traffic safety in a area that was designated as handicap parking, some concerns about the motor vehicle egress into that area. There was also some interior room design changes, changes for the medical area, medical rooms, the restrooms, reorientation of the fitness room. So it's still a work in progress in terms of the layout. There was some 3D imaging shown of the building exterior. I think seemed to be some consensus on portions of the building and also some concerns about the front area of the building. I think concerns over the lack of prominence of the entrance area. So the architect is taking all that back. Next is a letter with regard to the MSBA. There was a discussion that took place last week. We wanted to review the student enrollment numbers that are being reviewed by MSBA. One of the things that was noted is the prospect of impact from the West Street development on enrollment. And MSBA suggested that we take a closer look at that and also suggested that we consider seeking an extension to our eligibility period, which was done. A letter was submitted to that effect. So we were granted an additional 30 days so that we can provide some information about, as we know it anyways, the West Street project and what that might have a bearing on with respect to the student enrollment numbers. Then we have correspondence from Mr. Veerman. This has not happened in the last couple of years, as you know, because the July 4th events were canceled, but he writes, as you're aware, I'm a member of the Wilmington Board of Appeals. It has just recently been brought to my attention that the 4th of July Committee will be applying for a special permit to locate the 4th of July Carnival on the property known as former Swain School site on Middlesex Avenue for this year's upcoming Independence Day celebration. The area is directly across the street from my residence at 131 Middlesex Avenue. Although I am not sure if I am technically a direct abutter, I certainly may be and clearly live within 300 feet of the area. When this issue first arose several years ago, I contacted Town Council, who informed me that due to the proximity of my residence to the area in question, the safe course of conduct would be to recuse myself from hearing the committee's special permit application, since a direct abutter would be presumed to have a financial interest in the matter. Although I do not believe the carnival would necessarily benefit or disadvantage me financially due to the location of my home to this property, I was advised that the presumption of financial interest is a matter of law and not fact. He advised me to communicate my conflict to my appointing authority, namely the Board of Selectmen, and they have, on all 4 previous occasions, decided my conflict after proper deliberation and decision. Toward that end, please forward the communication to the Board of Selectmen, so this will come up later on the board to consider.
Okay. Now we will go on to boards to consider.
So under board to consider, the first item is a request of Monique Cook to use the town common for.
You skipped business.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the first one is the board to consider the disclosure in accordance with Chapter 268A, Section 20B, relative to an application for the special permit. This was just noted. Mr. Veerman had noted his situation. In my estimation, and based upon past practice, I think it would be reasonable that the board vote to determine Dan Veerman's ownership of property near the carnival site is not so substantial as to likely affect him from impartially acting upon the special permit application submitted by the 4th of July Committee.
Do I have a motion?
So
Grant the
moved.
request.
Second.
Second, any discussion? All in favor? So moved.
So the next one is this request from Monica Cook, Berkshire Hathaway Commonwealth Real Estate, to use the town common on Saturday, April 23rd, 2022, from 11 to 1, rain date on Sunday, April 24th, for the purpose of providing daffodils and raise awareness of Sunshine Kids. Sunshine Kids is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to children with cancer that provides positive group activities, emotional support for young cancer patients. The Sunshine Kids is funded by contributions from individuals, corporations, and philanthropic foundations. It offers a variety of programs and events. So this would be to provide information about this organization and accept donations if folks are so inclined.
Question through the chair to the town manager, if I may. Is, Jeff, I have no issue with the request, but just as a point of information for me, is something like this where, you know, there could be children and families, and to get onto the common if they park over at the 4th of July, do we just authorize this and they work with the police department, or do they have to have a detail? I'm just concerned about pedestrian crossing, so how does that work?
The police department would be notified, and if they deem it appropriate detail, then that would be.
Then they'll require it,
Right.
okay. Thanks.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve. Or do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, second. All right, any further discussion? Okay, I'll-
Just, no, I'm in favor of it. It's just a note that, is it April 23rd is election day, correct?
It is,
Yeah.
but this, yeah.
All right, all in favor? So moved.
This last board to consider is a request of Michael Murphy. He's been before the board in previous years to fly the Donate Life flag at the Wilmington Town Hall, recognition of April being the National Organ Donation Month.
Okay, do you have a motion?
Move to grant the request.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? So moved. Okay. Now we'll move on to public comments. Please state your name and address.
I rise to bring a few bits of information to the attention of the board. As I've been watching some of the meetings relative to the siting of some of the proposed town projects that are coming up, one in particular raised some concerns for me, and that's the siting of the potential town hall at the old Swain School site between there and the existing senior center. And one of the concerns was from the engineer that talked about stormwater management. And I just wanted to bring up that it would be a good idea for the board members to go down to the high school and take a look at the swamp or the wetlands beside the high school, because the locker room at the high school is at a very, very close elevation to that water table. There are pumps down there, but if the pumps go on and the water comes in there, there's no way to really drain it to, because it's just gonna be recirculating it because of the elevation of the basement. And so I bring this up because I think some attention needs to be put into this particular aspect of this siting, because ultimately I believe that if the stormwater management plan goes into effect for something like that, the water is gonna be going to that area. And I'd hate to see our high school locker room get flooded out and create a problem there. The other thing I have been researching is, I brought up the site on Salem Street that was taken by eminent domain back in 1972. And the specific purpose of the eminent domain land taking was to build a school. And I brought up the fact that when you take something by eminent domain, like is being done with the cemetery, you guys want to expand the cemetery, it has to be done for that. So if the land was taken for a school, it really can't be used for anything but a school. And so there are a lot of people that want an early education center. However, I think that we should probably put the brakes on and take a look at this site on Salem Street, because when you study and you read the documentation that's recorded at the Registry of Deeds, many people that you know that are prominent people in town that signed that document endorsed it, where it specifically said it's the best possible site for a school. And I'll go a step further. What I'll do is I'll email each and every one of you an email, and I'll attach the document to it so you'll have it right in front of you so you could actually read it yourself. And I bring this up because I think that would probably be a good idea for citing an early education center. But in addition to that, I think it would be a good idea to put a couple hockey rinks over there. And I think we can consider those hockey rinks part of the educational opportunities for the students. In addition to that, there's a railroad track that goes there. And we're talking about citing housing for closeness to Mbta, the Mbta district housing. And one of the things that we might want to consider is having some housing for teachers, which could also be coupled into an education project over there. And I do have a plan for financing the project, and my proposal would be to sell the Wildwood School site and use that money to fund this project. In addition to that, there's also a senior center project being proposed. And I think it would be a good idea to have a senior project that was also coupled with senior housing. And in addition to that, we have a piece of property that's beside St. Dorothy's Church that was taken by eminent domain. And I think that that's in a high traffic area, and I think if it was a mixed zoning type situation, that it would generate income.
Right,
to
that's
the
already
town.
been approved. So that's already, those plans are moving forward, so.
It's already been approved to build, what, the senior
Senior
center?
center? Yeah.
100%? Any senior housing going with that?
Nope, you
So-
can attend the senior, you can attend those meetings to get all those details.
Yeah, well, I just think that we might want to consider a philosophy that included income being generated into the town to fund some of these projects, because everyone's, getting pretty much to capacity on taxation.
Well, you probably wouldn't know that, though, because are you a resident of Wilmington anymore?
Yes, Mr. Hull, yeah. Yeah, you know what, Mr. Hull, I'll go a step further, okay? Would you like to see my license?
No, I don't need to see anything. Okay.
License doesn't mean you still live here, though.
But to your point,
And,
first of all, the town is well aware of the issues of the Swain property, and that is going to be looked at. That has been an issue that you've raised for probably 20 years now, and it'll certainly be...
The Swain property?
Yes, the potential concerns about water at the Swain School property, so
No,
that has been
my concerns were the water at the high school locker room,
Yeah.
because the water flows in that direction.
Right.
And if you go out there and you take a look at the elevation of the water, and you take a
Right,
look
off
at
of the
the
Swain
elevation.
property, that's what he's saying.
Huh?
Because of the Swain property, that's exactly what Mr. Hall is
As
saying.
of right now, the water elevation beside the high school
We
is.
have licensed contractors that are gonna be looking at this, so I'm sure they will let us know if there's an
And that's
issue.
why I came to the meeting tonight, because the licensed contractor that was doing the presentation at the meeting specifically stated that he was very concerned with the stormwater management. And after following the project,
Why wouldn't you bring this up to him at one of the meetings for
I'm
the
bringing it
town
up to you
hall?
because you're the leadership of the town.
But you should be bringing it up at that meeting when it's up for discussion. We're not prepared to dig
No.
through everything.
I'm not
and
asking
check
for
it
a
out.
vote
So
tonight.
we'll
I'm
make
just
note of that. We'll make
I'm
note
just
of
trying to
all
raise
your-
awareness.
We're quite aware.
We're well aware of that, and we're also well aware of this property on Salem Street that has been looked at previously. It was looked at as a potential site for the high school. Because of the wetlands, it was deemed not appropriate. It's been looked at on multiple occasions, and it is not, was not conducive to a high school. It perhaps can be looked at again, but I suspect isn't going to be conducive to any other school. So your point
So
is...
there's no uplands over there, Mr. Hull?
I'm not saying there's
I'll tell you
no
what, I'll tell you
uplands.
what, I'll be very happy to receive any type of testing, geological surveys over there, any type of water table testing, deep hole testing, perk testing. I'm sure you've done all of that, right?
I'm not saying
or
that
am I
there
assuming
isn't
you've
any
done nothing?
wetlands, and I'm not going to get into a debate, Mr. McDonald, with you about this. I'm simply saying that that property, as you're suggesting that the town has no clue as to what is on that property, and in fact, the town has looked at that property on multiple occasions in years past and has deemed it not suitable for a school.
It's, there's 73 acres, Mr.
Mr.
Hull.
McDonald, you come in here because we're the leadership and you want to bring stuff to our attention, but yet you have complete disregard for our knowledge of what's going on in this town, as Mr. Hull just said. You think we don't know any of this stuff?
I really don't think you do.
Oh, really? Well, I do.
How many-
Your
how many-
time is up here this evening.
how many
Have a good
acres?
evening.
Yeah, what you do
Now we're
about the
up
railroad
to
crossing?
announcements.
Is a train stopping
You
at
know
the
what?
tracks?
You are out of line and you have a good evening
Yeah,
now.
and you're not
okay?
accomplishing anything.
I'm not. Okay, well, don't vote for me if I run for re-election, okay? Thank you. You have a
I know
good
you had
night.
tough competition the last time.
You know what? You can leave now, okay?
Well,
Inappropriate.
I would like to have the
Do you want
train
me to call
stop
the
at,
police? I'll call the police and have you
we'd
escorted.
like to have the train stop at all the stations so no one else gets killed. Simple as
You are
that.
completely out of line.
I'm out of
okay?
line?
You are
I'm out of
completely
line?
out of line.
Thank you, sir. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening.
Yeah.
Don't you ever bring up somebody who died so tragically.
Have the
You
train
have
stop.
no clue what the
It wouldn't
MBTA.
have happened if the train stopped because the
We
engineer
do not run
would have
the
seen
MBTA.
the lights
Good
not
night,
on
Mr.
and the
McDonald.
lights not down.
All right, now we're
Simple
on
as
to
that.
announcements. Any further announcements?
I did want to...
Sorry, Mr. Bendel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did just quickly wanted to, we have a lot of valued employees that are retiring, but one is leaving us this coming Thursday. I wanted to recognize John Mulholland, who's served 25 years on the DPW, and him and his colleagues, some of the unsung heroes in our community. And
Yes.
he's a longtime resident, so I want to give him a shout out, thank him for his service, and wish him and his wife Gail a very long and healthy retirement.
Absolutely, wish him best.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does somebody else have an announcement?
I did just want to make note of a call that I received this afternoon from Charlotte Gray, who is the Community Services Spokesperson, Community Involvement Coordinator from EPA, and she had sent us some information about they're doing some outreach sessions. They're scheduled for Wednesday, March 30th from 9 to 10:30, Thursday, March 31st from 6 to 7:30 p.m., Monday, April 4th from 3 to 4:30 p.m., and Wednesday, April 6th from noontime to 1:30. These are an effort on their part to, as they're developing their community involvement plan, they're looking for input as to how EPA can communicate and engage with the community with regard to the Olin Superfund remediation. So these dates would be all Zoom sessions, but if either members of the Board of Selectmen or members of the public at large are interested in participating, you can go to the town's website. We do have a link to sign up for participation in one of these sessions. In fact, I think she said the session on Wednesday, April 6th, there are no takers on that one at this point.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to any new business. Okay, now we'll go into important dates.
We have March 30th is the Town School Admin Building Committee, room 9, 6 p.m. April 1st is the last day to register to vote in the annual town election, town meeting. Town clerk's office is open until 8 p.m. April 2nd is the rabies clinic. Could be a rabbi, but rabies clinic, Public Buildings Department, noon to 2 p.m. April 6th is the brush drop-off Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Also on April 6th is the Senior Center Building Committee, Town Hall, room 9, 6 p.m. April 9th is another brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. April 11th is a Board of Selectmen's meeting, 7 p.m. here at room 9. April 13th, brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. April 13th, the Town School Admin Building Committee, Town Hall, 6 p.m. April 16th is the Little League Opening Day Parade, starts at 9:30 a.m. April 16th is another brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. April 18th, Town Hall is closed for Patriots Day. Another brush drop-off on the 20th of April, Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Senior Center Building Committee, April 20th, Town Hall, room 9, 6 p.m. Brush drop-off on April 23rd, Old Main Street, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Town elections on April 23rd. Polls open at 8 a.m. and will remain open until 8 p.m. Another Selectmen's meeting on April 25th, Town Hall, room 9, 7 p.m. April 27th, a brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Annual town meeting is April 30th at the high school, the Joanne Benton Auditorium, 9 a.m. And the April 30th brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And the Special Olympics opening ceremonies, May 9th, Wilmington High School, 9:15 a.m.
Great.
Madam Chair, may I ask
Yes.
one question, please? When do you envision, either through you to the manager or yourself, when we'll be deciding what our July and August dates are going to be? When do you think we'll take that up as a board? Not to spot you, but I mean, when do we typically decide?
May?
Yeah.
May.
May meeting.
May.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, well, that'll do it for this evening. Oh, yep.
Mentioned, Madam Chair, I'll make a motion, we table the salute to service at the request of the family that'd like to
Yes.
be present. They couldn't be here tonight.
Absolutely, yeah.
We can table that.
Yep, yep. Absolutely. Yeah, let's make a motion for that.
Motion to table this.
You second? Okay, all in favor? Terrific. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm gonna get in a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
So moved. Thank you. Have a good night.
WCTV, connecting our community.